I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna shout, I'm gonna let the reason out that his love goes on forever. I'm gonna take it all the way, I'm gonna praise.
Hi, I'm Pastor Bill here with your Maple Minute for this Tuesday, March the 30th, 2021. We're in the book of Ecclesiastes, and we've been looking as on a journey that we've been on for quite some time with Solomon, the wisest man to have ever lived, as he looked at life and the meaning of life. And really, he's looking to find not just meaning, but happiness, contentment. And isn't that really what everybody's looking for? We're starting, though, on our journey to wind it down. And as we wind it down, Solomon ends the book of Ecclesiastes that he's been looking at. And you remember, for the first 10.5 chapters, he's been looking at life without God, life under the sun. And so he's been looking for this elusive meaning of life. And the message that he's got is really about the uncertainty of life. Life has been very uncertain, and he can't really draw a whole lot of conclusions, because without God in your life, there really isn't a lot of certainty. There isn't a lot of good things to it. And so along the journey that we've been on, Solomon has demonstrated the meaninglessness of life without God. He really has done it, and I don't know if he was doing it on purpose, but God worked it for our benefit, if nothing else. And so as we get into the last 2 chapters of the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon is going to resolve all the questions that he's raised about life and its meaning in the first 10 half chapters. And in preparing to finish this thought out, he articulates some key principles that we should base our lives on. The first that we want to talk about is the fact that life is uncertain, so we should embrace it. That is, and whether you're a Christ follower or not, this is true. Life is so uncertain, and I think that's what 2020 and the future has given us, an uncertainty. But you can either hide at home and be scared and mad about it, or you can just simply embrace it. And that's what I would say. Hey, get up and hug life. You only have one to live, so you might as well enjoy what you've got. In fact, 4 times in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, in the first 6 verses, Solomon reminds us of what we do not and cannot know. He tells us there are 4 things. First of all, you cannot know what evil will be on the earth. And that's so true. We didn't know last year. I remember as we entered into the month of March, all of a sudden things changed. And you know, even when we started figuring out this thing about Corona, we didn't know it was going to last this long. We didn't know we were going to have to do things differently. We didn't know what it would change, and we certainly didn't know the cost it would cost so many people. You don't know what evil will be on the earth. That's the truth. The second thing he says is you don't know what is the way of the winds. and that's just a simple saying. It really is just, you don't know what the future holds once again. Winds of change blow so often, and you never know where wind's coming from. I know, and it frustrates me. The weather forecasters here, at least in this area, they don't seem to know a whole lot about the weather, and I know why, because they don't know the way of the winds. And that's one of those things Solomon told us, hey, a long time ago. You can't know the way of the winds. The third thing he tells us is you don't know the works of God. And that's one of those things. He's not saying you can't see what God's doing. He's saying you don't know the why. You don't know what God's going to do. You don't have the mind of God. So stop trying to understand God and just live life. Embrace it is what he's trying to encourage us. And the fourth thing is he says you don't know which will prosper. And he gives us some illustrations as we get into this, and we're gonna read through the verses so you understand what he's saying here in just a minute. But really, out of all 4 of those things that he sort of gets us to understand that we don't know, he gives us 2 practical, useful scraps of advice that we should adhere to. In the first 2 verses, Solomon tells us to be diversified in your investments. Now, if you're tuning in, you think this is a financial planning seminar. It's not. I'm not the guy you'd want to have advise you on that. I'm a preacher, not a financial wizard. But I'll tell you this much. Solomon, who was very wise, he's not really just talking about money. It can be applied there. He's really talking about your life. Because remember, the thought is what is the whole deal with life. And I know some of us, we're getting up there in years, and this may be a sad note because we've let so much life go by. But still, every day, embrace it and enjoy it. He says this in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. He says, cast your bread. There's this investment thing. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. In verse 2, he says, give a portion to 7 or even to 8, For you know not what disaster may happen on earth. Remember, there's that evil thing. You don't know what evil's going to happen. And he's just really telling us, hey, you know what? Go out, embrace life, and invest in different things. Be diversified. Don't put all your eggs in one basket because you just don't know what's going to happen. And since life is so uncertain, we have to spread out our investments. And the biggest investments I could say are in the works of God, obviously, but in other people. That's what Jesus did. Jesus, he encouraged us not to waste our time investing in things that, hey, you know what, people could steal here on earth. He encouraged us not to waste our time on things here that would rust or just fall apart, is what he said. But he said, store up yourselves, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. And those treasures really are other people, the relationships we have, and the things we do for Jesus' name. That's what he would tell us. So be diversified in what you do. Don't just sit around and mope about life. Even though you may have some issues, there may be problems in your life. I'm not saying it's going to be a problem-free life, but here's what I am saying. Enjoy it. Embrace it. Hug life like you are living it to the fullest. And that's the best thing. The second piece of advice that Solomon gives us is found in verses 3-6, where he says not just to be diversified in what we invest in, but to be diligent in your involvement. And I think that's so important. The two big things that people do is they withdraw and don't invest in other people and other things, and they don't get involved. They became loners, and this is what the coronavirus has really caused a lot of us to do, even if we didn't try to do it. And Solomon says, hey, you ought to enjoy your life because it's this one-time go-around, and invest yourself and then be involved. Be involved. He says in verses 3-6, he said, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. No duh. He's given us some obvious truths. But those are things sometimes we forget. And what's going to happen? What he's saying is, what's going to happen, you don't control. Hey, there are cycles we see in life, and there are a lot of things we don't see. He goes on to say, he who observes the wind will not sow. And he's talking about somebody planting. If you just sit around and watch the wind, you don't know when the wind's going to blow and how it's going to blow. We already said that. You're just not going to plant, and so you'll never have any crop. He says he who regards the clouds, worried about whether it's going to rain, they're not going to harvest. See, you always had to harvest before the rains came, the fall rains came, and that's what he's talking about there. And he's, if you sit around just worrying about the clouds, you're never going to get time to do what you need to do, so you'll never benefit. Get involved. Get out and do something. He says, as you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. And he's so right. You think about it, one of the biggest miracles of life is life itself. The fact of someone having a baby and that baby growing inside that mother, and how life comes from into that baby, that womb. It's amazing to see a woman who's pregnant, and you get the chance to see her belly moving because that baby's in there kicking or punching at her. It's just an amazing thing, and that's the life that God gives. But he points out the fact that you don't know how that life got there, really. We can only understand so much in science. God's the one who makes everything, and that's what he wants to remind us. Be diligent in your involvements. Keep moving forward is what we've been talking about lately. Keep moving forward. The more uncertainty, the more determined we should be. What he's trying to get us to understand is prepare for the worst and work for the best. See, in the morning, he says, in the morning, sow your seed. In the morning, sow your seed. And don't just do it then. He says, and at evening, withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. What he's saying is be diligent. Just keep working. Keep planning. You never know what's going to happen. Because God's the one who's in charge. That's what he's trying to get us to understand. Prepare for the worst, work for the best. Over and over and over again, the Bible tells us to work, to be faithful, to be diligent, to be strong, to use our gifts and resources wisely, and not to wait. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 16, this is what Paul said. He says, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. And, I almost thought, well, was Paul here last year in 2020 or 2021? Things are getting bad. But you know what? Make the best use of your time. Don't sit around and complain about it. Go do something. There is a lot of uncertainty in our world today, as we've been talking about on Sunday nights. But you know what? The one thing that is certain is God has called you to do something. So go out and do it. You know, the world's a mystery and life is a vapor. It's soon over. Solomon tells us, though, work hard, live wisely, and have a joyful countenance, because those things are not uncertain. They are the best chance for those who would make the most of life here on earth and enjoy heaven eventually. Life is uncertain. So how do you deal with the uncertainty of life? Just go out and enjoy it. That's the best thing you can do. So until next time, why don't you just go out and hug life today? Do something great for somebody else and enjoy it, because that's what you can do. Be diversified in your investments and be diligent in your involvement. Until next time, this has been the Maple Minute.
His name up high, 'cause his love goes on forever.